groups have been forming forever. You know, people join a stamp club and they join a rock and roll club and they join a car club and they...
Well, how would you fit Adam and Eve into that? I think that 2's company, 3's a crowd, 4's a group. So Adam and Eve were only a couple.
Right.
But then they got a crowd when they got 2 kids and one of them killed the other, right?
Right. So do we want more groups forming, more splinters?
Why do you make an equation of groups forming and splinters?
Well, part of what happens is, like, you know, people get together because of a shared interest, and isn't that in some ways part of how we've gotten so polarized, is that the more extreme fundamentalists form this group and the more extreme
We're not going to change
liberals.
We're not going to change human nature that much that people won't compete with each other or be alienated by otherness, but we will have the format and the morality to not encourage that and do everything we can to show the importance of mutuality
And building connections.
and respecting otherness. That would be our moral system. So will that change the whole society? Well, I'm not pretending that that's going to happen, but it would have an influence.
But philosophically, that would be the foundation.
Philosophically, you would want to have your morals for mutuality grow and spread into the community and have an impact. And there would always be forces that would say, we don't like what you're doing, or you're not saying it the way we say it, and suddenly you've got a conflict. I have no answer to that.
Well, that raises one of the obvious issues from even within the field of psychotherapy. We now have more than 400 different distinct forms of psychotherapy, and they compete with one another rather than complement one another. They create divisions. You know, this group doesn't particularly like that group. This group thinks that group's too superficial. This group thinks that group's too deep. And you know, even within the psychotherapy community, we don't have that kind of morality that acknowledges the merits of mutuality. It is even competition there. How do we get past that?
I would be very happy if any group that I was associated with, let's say 100 people or 200 people, if these people got the message of the compatibility of self and other, and the morality of mutuality, and the optimism of benevolence, and all of the many other things that would be a part of this psychological perspective, I would not expect any more than that. I mean, even though I would know that if this were to grow, it would have a large effect. But that's not where my perspectives go. It's a long way from just doing what you're doing in the particular situation that you're in and doing it well, and doing with principles that have a chance to spread onto another group. And there may be another one, there may be another one.
So what is it about you and where you are at this point in your life that makes this worth your time and energy? Well, we had a little technological glitch that ended up preventing the last few minutes of our discussion from being filmed. And so I would like to summarize and paraphrase my questions and Erv's responses so you have an idea of what you missed. The next question that I asked Erv was, why now? Why is this important to you at this point in your life to start to write about? And his answer was, it has always been important to him, that even as a young psychologist back in Cleveland, in the early part of his career, he was very interested in group work, group dynamics. He was very interested in people getting connected and staying connected in the best of ways. So when he moved to San Diego, He started the Gestalt Training Center, and he was doing training groups for much of his professional career as well as writing. And so he didn't pay as much attention to the idea of life-focused communities, but it's always been in the background. And now he said he has the time, he has the inclination to revisit this very important topic and give it the attention that he feels it deserves. The next question came from a viewer who asked the question, what about groups going beyond shared social functions and psychological functions and engaging in altruistic acts? Erv smiled and laughed at that, and he said, wouldn't that be the ideal? Wouldn't that be the best possible thing of all, to be able to use that kind of self-awareness to be more socially responsible, more socially responsive? And so his answer to the question was he would love it if groups went that extra step beyond. And then I asked the question, what about religion versus life-focused groups? Erv cited the statistic that only about 23% of people go to church specifically for religious reasons. And he said that really the majority of people who go to church are going for other reasons. They like the music, they like the camaraderie, they like the shared focus, they like the inspiration, they like being there, they just like the ambiance of being in that environment. So he said that it really isn't about religion and spirituality that drives people into these group settings. It really is a desire to affiliate, and the idea of being able to use that affiliation to enhance one's psychological awareness. Well, that really is the primary intention of what Erv calls life-focused communities. So the idea of being with people who would encourage greater self-awareness, being around people who would encourage a greater sense of psychological sophistication and psychological connection, not just with each other, but within oneself, to have a much better sense of one's own motivations, one's own drives, one's own needs, one's vulnerabilities, one's strengths, and all the good things that come out of having greater self-awareness, not only in terms of being more congruent in the way one lives and more refined in the way that one lives, but being able to contribute more to others as well. So this emphasis in the conversation with Erv has, I think, been a very inspiring one. I love the idea of life-focused communities, and especially now as people are getting more isolated, not just isolated from each other, but isolated from themselves. How many people suffer stress-related disorders because they're not really aware that they're stressed? Or how many people are suffering depression and anxiety and increased other kinds of difficulties simply because they're detached from themselves and in some senses detached from the world around them. And so this notion of Erv's, of developing life-focused communities, I think holds great potential to be a great psychological next step for our social and human evolution. So I am grateful to Erv for taking the time to talk with me about his ideas. I look forward to when his book will come out, and I hope that you too will look forward to his book on life-focused communities, which in theory should be coming out sometime in early 2013. So I hope you'll look for it. I hope you'll consider these ideas carefully. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation as much as I have. Thanks so much for your attention.